So we finally made it to the hangar, and it was a little dark in here, so I turned on a couple of the lights. It's still pretty dark. I'm gonna roll open one of the hangar doors just to let some light in and see how much it's raining outside. And yeah, as I expected, it's pretty rainy out. Do have a couple of the T-38s out at NASA though, that's kind of cool. So our big overarching project on what we're doing just in general is this engine came out of this MiG-21 over here, and we're actually going to be swapping it. I guess more accurate statement would be that that engine came out of the MiG-21 and we're putting this one in. Before we can put it in, there's a couple things we got to do. We just got to swap some parts. Most of that's already done. There's a fuel pump on this side. It took a little while to do, but we actually swapped it, put some lines on, and the last thing we have to do is put a new afterburner fuel pump on. The MiG-21 is actually infamous for these fuel pumps. They go bad all the time. We pulled it out, that's why there's this big empty space here. And we put it over here. So we have the one that we took out of the airplane, and then we have a brand new one from Poland. You can see how reflective that is. That is a brand new part for a MiG-21. One issue though is that we have to swap a little wire between the two, and the connection is slightly different. So this is just a slightly different diameter. So we're going to try and swap them so then we can put the wire back on, and it should work out. Now when I'm working on something like this, there's a lot of things I like to look at. So the number one thing you have to be concerned about, especially working with old airplanes, is that all of the parts you take off, you remember where they go, and also that you keep them in good enough shape. Because if you mess up a part on an old plane, that can be it. So that's why we have to take a lot of care doing these things, and a part like this we have to swap carefully because that'll just keep it usable for the next iteration, of course. So I got some tools here. We'll just try and take it off. It looks like it's a little square drive. I measured it with a caliper. It's about 4 millimeters, so that's kind of a weird little size, but we'll try and pop that off, and should work out. The other thing that's big to remember, a lot of people forget this, MiGs, European aircraft, a lot of them are in millimeters. We of course use in the United States fractions of inches, so a lot of the wrenches are kind of weird sizes. So when I initially grabbed a wrench that I thought fit, it's of course in fractions of an inch rather than millimeters. So the conclusion that I came to is that since we're going to swap the entire stud because it does not actually fit on there, we're going to actually have to double nut it probably. That's simply too small of a diameter, and that's a technique you can use whenever you're trying to remove a stud. And what that is basically you put two nuts, tighten them real close up against each other so you can loosen the bottom one and it'll pull the stud out. So that's what we're going to try now. And right on top, I forgot, I actually have a collection of bolts. I like to keep spare bolts. I keep saying bolts, these are nuts. I keep a spare assortment of bolts and nuts. They're really useful around the hangar for different things. So we'll see if any of those fit, and we'll also try a couple of these. These look like they might fit right here. I have two nuts that I found that look perfect actually. Then you also want to make sure that you can absolutely do not have the right size, which that may be the case. Of course. Also, it got even darker outside because of the rain, so we're going to go ahead and flick on the nighttime lights. We got these installed pretty recently from another volunteer at the museum, and did a fantastic job. Turns out I underestimated the width or diameter of that actual stud, so looking for some other nuts that'll fit on there, and I have to say nuts because I can't find them. We'll keep looking though. Good night. Yeah, I also have no idea why they did that many crush washers. Really goofy. So we had this little socket set, and I tried different. Let me try it one more time, make sure I'm not an idiot.
There's definitely some oil in that one.
Yeah, so now I've been trying to do more long form content and focus, because people wanted to see like actually not a 10-second video. They're like, hey, what do you actually do? So today I've just been kind of filming like everything we do in a day.
Yeah.
Like literally everything. Then I got distracted because someone came in to come tour the museum. No, yeah, none of these sizes fit. All right, well, that was a little discouraging. Couldn't find the right tool, so now we're going to run over to the other hangars that we have here where the F4 Phantom is, and there's some other tools over there. We'll see if anything over there is special enough to make it work. The guy that you just saw come in is actually, his name is Theron. He's one of our A&Ps. Super good worker and super knowledgeable. So it's good that we got someone else to help out. And that's kind of how it is here. I also did get interrupted and just gave a full tour of the museum, because this is actually a museum people can come and see. So some people came and checked it out, and now we're getting back to work. We'll go look for those tools. Probably should. An absolutely iconic day. This is definitely the Messerschmitt hangar, but there are some tools in here. In the F4 hangar, but okay.
Are they the right tools, though?
At least the Messerschmitt makes good B-roll. What was I going to say? Anyways, there's all of this piping. I just want to find... There's like junk piping here that's a little bit longer. I wish I had like a slightly longer...
How fast does it drip?
Well, a decent amount, but the thing is, once the bucket fills past a certain point, it'll hit this and pour over. So I guess it doesn't need to be like wide diameter. I just want something that's a little bit longer so we can put it on any airplane and it'll be long. Like maybe this, I can cut a length of this.
Yeah.
This is perfect. So at least we have a side quest knocked out today.
Side quest.
A side quest. Young Theron. There. So this will go in the bottom of the bucket. This we can pour it overboard. That can even be shorter, honestly. Now I just need a glue of some kind. And back by the T-38s. So the MiG-17 has been rained on. It's dripping through the ceiling and dripping on the rain a lot. It's getting it soaking wet, and that's obviously bad for an aircraft. So what I'm going to do is put down a rag, put a bucket on it, drill a hole, put this in the bucket so that the water can go through here when it gets past that level, and it'll pour it out on the ground. So that's what I'm going to do now. Just kind of make a hole in this bucket. Now we just got to put some sealant in it, and we'll have a water bucket. There we go, sealant applied. Beautiful. Here is said MiG-17. See how much rain is on it. Yep. A lot. The entire wing is soaked. Just like that. So we have the bucket. Bucket's filled up. That'll at least give it a little bit. So my thought is I'll put one of these rags on the bottom once the bucket's done. Put the bucket on top of it, and then the hose will just come overboard and dump the water overboard so it's not getting the wing soaking wet. All right.
Get an actual contact.
So we got a little off track today, and we couldn't find those nuts. We'll go to the store tomorrow and I guess find those steel nuts so we can get that off, or maybe perhaps a wrench that'll fit those tiny little square drives. But that just goes to show in a day here how we can do multiple different things, like building our water contraption bucket. We had some people come by the museum and show them around. That was pretty cool. Theron came by, Ryan came by, got to hang out. Looked for tools, couldn't find tools. So this is just a day. I think that I will also include, though, a tour of the jet so we can at least see what MiGs we work on. We're showing Theron the MiG-21 cockpit right now because he's never actually seen it. What's interesting about these is that the back seat is an instructor cockpit, meaning that all the switches in here can cause safety of flight issues, so we don't let normal people sit in them. But of course, like volunteers and people who work here can, but that's why we don't let people sit in them. How you like this cockpit?
It's snug. Of course, it's not designed for guys like me, so.
How tall are you?
I'm 6'5".
6'5"?
So if I gotta pull the ejection handles, I'm done for.
A little bit out of luck?
Yeah.
Anything that sticks out to you?
Obviously the color of the panel.
Color of the panel? That's what a lot of people say. I've gotten a lot of comments about that, actually.
I don't know why. I've heard it's because it's like supposed to be like calming or soothing or something like that, but I don't buy that. I don't know why they decided to paint their panels this like green.
I can ride a MiG-21.
Saddle the MiG-21.
Yep. The most comfortable aircraft I'd say is probably the A4. You can sit up there. Yeah, you can sit up there for air shows and, or actually the F4 because you can lay on it like and it cracks your back. You tried that? Because no, on the tail or the whole spine. So I figured since we got a lot of work done, but ultimately didn't get what we wanted to knock out today, I figured it'd be cool to at least give you kind of a show of some of the MiGs, because we're talking today about working on MiGs in particular. We have 3 here. I want to kind of show you each of them individually just real quick. I'll probably plan on doing a more in-depth kind of each one. I think people would like to see a tour of that, but this will just be kind of an overview. This is what we were working on today, or at least the engine out of it. This is a MiG-21. This particular is a UM model, which is the U is training and M modernized, whatever that is in Russian. So it has a lot of the more modern MiG-21 parts, but it is still a MiG-21, which is a relatively old design. Because it's the M, the UM, it has the newer ejection seats. That's pretty cool. And it's obviously, since it's U, 2 seats because you have an instructor in the back. That's pretty cool. As you can see, the tail is removed. We removed the tail, got the tail off, pulled the engine out. That was a little bit hard as well. And then we had to take a lot of time to label everything because there's not a lot of good manuals for MiG-21. So we labeled all of the parts, separated things, and that took a little bit of time. Now that we have the engine out, that's what we've been working on for a while. It's very close to going back in. As soon as we get back together, we'll throw it back in the airplane, take it on a test flight. And that'll be that, and we'll be back to being one of the MiG-21 operators. And said engine we were working on, this is a Germansky R11-300F. The actual designation that it uses is written over here, and it says P11, some figure 2CK-300, but that's, as we would say in English, R11-300. Here we have the starter generator, and they have the casing off because they actually can use this to turn the accessory drive. So whenever we're mounting accessories, they basically have shafts, and they have to come together at the right time. So what you can do is move this so you can line them all up. This pump right here is what we swapped first. This is a fuel controller and main fuel pump. And we actually had to swap this whole thing. So we pulled the whole thing out and put a whole new one in. And then on the other side is the afterburning pump. And that's what we're working on right now that we were doing earlier today and talking about. And this is our MiG-15. It's from the People's Liberation Air Force, the Chinese Air Force, if you will. And this particular MiG-15 is actually a combat veteran. It served in Korea against the United States, which is a little interesting being a museum in the United States and having something like that. But it is really cool to have a combat veteran aircraft. The MiG-15 was obviously one of the iterations of the earlier MiGs. Obviously they had MiG-3 through 9, but this is the first or second jet MiG, and the one that I think really kicked off the design for the manufacturer. This one is 996, so if you see that in air shows, because this still flies around a lot, that is what this is. It's non-afterburning, whereas our MiG-17, which you'll see looks very similar, does have an afterburner. Its construction is really rudimentary, has a lot of rivets everywhere. They're kind of, I don't want to say poorly done because the craftsmanship is good, but relative to a lot of American aircraft, a little bit more rough around the edges, if you will. It's an entirely pneumatic system, a lot of air systems on board, and overall a really interesting aircraft, and it's actually probably the most reliable of the MiGs we work on here, I think. Flew it in this air show, not a single issue. It hadn't flown since an air show a year prior, so it had a full year of kind of sitting. Just did all the normal yearly maintenance items on it, and it flew again. Absolutely no issues, landed absolutely no issues. So this thing, we like to joke that it's built like a tank because it really is. Fun fact about the MiG-15 is that it actually has an area, it's filled up here, but it actually has a place you can put a tow rope so you can pull it out of the snow and ice, which I think is the most poignant thing for MiG-15 because we joke about it being a tractor and an off-road machine. And there they go, they actually thought of that. All right, so now we'll be opening the canopy of the MiG-15. This one. I think the principal most interesting thing is those pneumatic brakes, and you can actually hear them. So it sounds a little bit like a train, I think. As I was walking around and explaining stuff about the MiG-15, I realized something interesting is that since we haven't really done any work to it because it's such a tank, that there's a lot of the inner workings of it that I haven't seen. So that's really interesting. It's kind of a little bit mysterious for that. I know a lot about how it works, but there's a lot of things that I don't because I physically haven't had to do it because it hasn't gone wrong yet. I think that's a pretty good problem to have. It's a pretty cool rig, it really is. And now we're on our MiG-17. This is actually technically not a MiG-17, and I'll get to that. This is a Polish Lim series, so it's actually a copy of the MiG-17. It's licensed built in Poland. It's one for one though, but they actually made a couple slight modifications, but it's pretty much a one-to-one license built MiG-17. This one is afterburning, so it is a little bit more advanced than MiG-15. And all they did to make the afterburning MiG-17 is that they took an auxiliary pump basically off of the MiG-15 engine and installed an afterburner pump in its place. So it lacks one of the emergency auxiliary pumps, but it gains an afterburning pump and it gains an afterburner. That gives it more thrust, but oddly enough, that means that the MiG-15 actually makes more thrust without an afterburner than this does, but obviously with an afterburner, this makes more thrust than both of them, which is pretty interesting. This paint scheme is not historic. This is just an air show paint scheme, really, because it was always filmed as an aggressor aircraft, of course, the MiGs being Eastern relative to us in the US. So this has a hammer and sickle on it, but then it has a couple other interesting features on it. The original paint scheme, when it was painted in the 1990s, they actually added a lot of labels for things in English. So back here, for instance, it says engine oil, service access, and it tells you what oil to put in there and caution and stuff. So you actually know what accesses it is. So that's actually kind of a cool paint scheme for that reason. Back here, there's actually a Bible quote on it. It says, "The Lord also maketh thunder in the heavens," which is Psalms 18, verse 13, which is kind of interesting. I think that's a very poignant jet quote, so that's kind of interesting. This particular one, we just did some work to. This one other than the MiG-21, I think this is the MiG that we've been doing the most work to, and we've been doing a lot of stuff to the cockpit. So it sat out in the rain at some point, I think 4 or 5 years ago, and the cockpit was open and it got some rain in its avionics bay, which means we had to swap pretty much all of the avionics on board. That was done over the past year or so, and that culminated about a week ago with us putting in a new audio control head. And now I just tested it and the comms are back and everything's good to go. GPS is back, the fuel gauge, it's all good to go. So this is now a completely operable aircraft. So this audio panel down here is actually what we swapped. So we put a new one in and now all the audio is working perfectly fine. Other than that, everything else works just like a top. Nice thing about being here is that we also have spare engines. So this is an engine off of MiG-21 that came off of a pole. So there was a MiG-21 that got put on a pole and kind of scrapped, but we took the engine out because the engine is good, and this is that. And then we actually have more spare engines in here, such as this, another one that came off another MiG, 2 afterburner cans. This is an unrelated Rolls-Royce Viper engine, and then we have a drop tank for the MiG-21 right there. I would say that the number one biggest issue to working on MiGs is that all of the manuals are not in English. I don't know if I've seen a single native English MiG-21 manual, actually. So we have a lot of these, and a lot of them are translated from Russian to either Russian to English, Russian to Chinese to English, Russian to Indian to English, or Russian to Czech to English. This particular one I think is just Russian to English, so it's a little bit easier to understand. This is a pilot flying handbook, but the problem for us doing maintenance on it is that most of these maintenance ones are translated 3 times, and that means that they have a lot of things that they do not cover. For instance, a lot of tools that they don't know how to translate. So for instance, I know one time something like a 7/16 or whatever that is in metric socket, they didn't physically know how to translate that, so they just wrote special tool. And now that's kind of a running joke around here, is that the manual always says you just need a special tool, but we don't know what that is. That occurs pretty much in every single thing it tells you to do. It says use a special tool. What they just mean is insert tool here. It's just there's not a translation for it. Occasionally some words will translate correctly, like hammer. Hammer will translate correctly, but pretty much anything that has more than a single word just absolutely will not. So it's very hard to actually diagnose stuff, because it'll say, hey, in order to do this, just do this. And I'm like, okay. And then they'll say to reverse that, just do it in reverse. And that's the only description that it'll have. It's pretty much useless, but these are the books that we have, and that is how we make things work. It just takes a lot of time to go through them and try and figure out what they're talking about, and sometimes find pictures of what you're doing. Sometimes you have to find examples, look at another engine out there that has the same design, and just see how it all is on that engine, and that's just how you have to do things. The other good resource we have is, of course, other people in the industry that work on MiGs and will ask them kind of how they do it, or a couple of the people that have been doing it for a long time. They have a lot of kind of tricks and know-how that we just don't have. So that's really just how we have to work on things around here.